Hotep. I am a History Network show. It's Wednesday, January 5th, 2022, and we are live. So some people saw the story that I posted on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, today, dealing with Howard University and at least 7 other HBCUs have received death threats on Tuesday, January 4th, triggering evacuations and lockdowns. Now, thegrio.com has an article on this, and the Grio picked up the story from the Washington Post. We're going to talk some about this. The Black News Channel had a story on this as well. We're going to talk some about this on today's show. What's behind this? We know the ATF, the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, they are investigating this as well. Luckily, no one was hurt, number one. Two, for most of these schools, people were still out on school break. So there were very few people on campus in most of these cases. But we're going to talk about this story. Then also, you remember back in November, we talked about Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case, 1896, and Homer Plessy, who was the plaintiff. Homer Plessy was arrested for refusing to give up his seat on a segregated segregated train car in 1892 in Louisiana. In that case, went to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1896 and solidified separate but equal. Okay, and this solidified the Jim Crow laws, etc. Well, back in November, you may remember that we talked about a Louisiana State Board of Pardons recommended that Homer Plessy posthumously be exonerated, okay, because he was charged with refusing to give up his a seat on a railroad car. All right. Well, that happened today. Louisiana's governor on Wednesday posthumously pardoned Homer Plessy, the African-American man whose arrest for refusing to leave a whites-only railroad car in 1892 led to the U.S. Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Okay, we'll talk some about that, and we'll talk a little bit about the significance of the Plessy versus Ferguson U.S. Supreme Court case also. All right, and Associated Press has a story about this, and I posted about it on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, today as well. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and you know, it's good that this happened, but it's nice when we could get justice when we're like still alive to like be able to enjoy it. You know, I'm just saying it's good that this happened, but it's better when we can get justice and exonerated when we're still alive. All right, so that's just a side note, but at least they're doing the right thing in Louisiana. Okay, one of the former Confederate states. At least they're doing the right thing there. So we'll discuss that. Then a lot of people saw the press conference that Attorney General Merrick Garland did today. The DOJ will hold those responsible for January 6th riot accountable, whether they were present or committed other crimes. We're going to talk a little bit about this as well as the investigation continues. I've been following it pretty much daily, and his press conference today was significant. There had been a lot of people saying that, oh, he's not doing enough, but I already know the moves that the Justice Department is going to make. Those moves are going to be silent. They're not going to hold a press conference every time they do something. I already knew that. Okay. But he did give an update today. I think he should have given an update sooner, but he did give an update today which is good. All right, so we'll discuss some about that. We'll discuss that a little bit and let you hear um, an excerpt of the press conference as well. All right, Donald Trump was supposed to give a press conference or deliver a speech on January 6th. He has decided not to do it. Now, I don't know what he was going to say. And if he has any attorneys that still represent him, and he actually pays them because he has a reputation not paying his attorneys. If he has any attorneys that still represent him, they were probably telling him, you don't want to go out there and do a speech because whatever you say could be used against you in the court of law. So he canceled a little speech he was going to give. He's trying to get some attention. He likes to be the center of attention. So we'll, on Thursday's show, we'll do a recap of what takes place with the acknowledgement and commemoration of the January 6th domestic terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. And let's keep in mind, it was promoting the big lie. It was operating, is based upon the premise of the big lie that the election was stolen from Trump. It wasn't stolen. He lost. He was defeated. And none of these Republicans who still support the big lie, none of them can explain, well, if your argument is that Democrats stole the election from Trump, then explain to me how so many Republicans in the House of Representatives won their House races and they're on the same ballot as Trump was. Okay. How many fraudulent votes were for Republicans? If you're saying Democrats stole the election, then how is it that they didn't steal it well enough for Jamie Harrison in the Senate to beat Lindsey Graham in South Carolina? They didn't steal it well enough for to win more Senate seats from Republicans, but they stole it well enough for Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump. But the Republicans in both the Senate and the House are on the same ballot. And actually, Republicans in the House picked up Senate seats. So how many of the Republican votes are fraudulent? They don't want to have this conversation. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Stand by. All right. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Stand by, everybody. Okay. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. We have 3 new advertising packages. I just released them today. If you didn't get the email, then you want to register for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. It's the first time I've offered 3 different advertising packages. This is fantastic. You're going to like this. We're the African American business owners. Post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. Stand by. We can get you up and running in one day. We have 1 million followers on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, so we can also do posts for you and upload to our stories on Facebook. There's a number of different things that you're going to get. Stand by. I have to get ready for this next segment. Oh, hell, where is... Back from break in 2 minutes. by, everybody. Who still needs to register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, and Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. The 10-week online courses that I teach, and we deal with thousands of years of history. Stand by. Now we're on 10 different audio podcast platforms. Okay, we've got Ronnie. How you doing, Ronnie? Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the future of radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. And we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right. I want to go to this first story here. So I saw a piece from thegrio.com dealing with these bomb threats at a number of historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Okay. And I saw the piece from thegrio.com, and then also Washington Post has a story dealing with this as well. All right. Howard University and at least 7 other HBCUs received bomb threats triggering evacuations, and lockdowns. All right. So luckily, as I was saying before the break, luckily no one was hurt, apparently so far. Luckily, no one was hurt. And for most of the campuses, you didn't have a lot of people on campus because people are still on winter break. Okay, still on winter break. And in one case, one of the campuses, they are delaying the start of the winter semester because of COVID-19 as well, because of the rise in COVID-19 cases. All right, so I want to go to the story here from the Washington Post, and they just updated this story later this afternoon. We pull this up here. All right. So at least 8 historically Black colleges and universities received death threats on Tuesday, school officials said, triggering abrupt evacuations of students and employees. Spelman College, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, Florida Memorial University, Howard University, Norfolk State University, and let me see, the computer's freezing up on me. Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, just okay. Norfolk State University, North Carolina Central University, Prairie View A&M in Texas, and Xavier University. Okay, you had this taking place at all these schools. They had these death threats. I mean, these bomb threats, I should say, bomb threats. All right, now let's pull this up here. Okay, let me try to flip over. The screen was freezing up on me. All right, so now we've got this up. Okay, good. All right, so this piece here from the Washington Post: Howard University and at least 7 other HBCUs received bomb threats, triggering evacuations and lockdowns. So once again, those colleges, Spelman College, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, Florida Memorial University, Howard University, Norfolk State University, North Carolina Central University, Prairie View A&M University in Texas, and Xavier University of Louisiana reported bomb threats. Now, fortunately, no explosions occurred. Okay, fortunately, no explosions occurred. Now, multiple schools ordered evacuations or lockdowns and alerted local law enforcement. It was not immediately clear whether the threats were connected. It was not immediately clear. So before people just start going off spreading conspiracy theories on social media, like people just irresponsibly usually do, it was not immediately clear whether the threats were connected or whether they were racially motivated. But early Wednesday, all of the schools had released all clear notices to their communities. Okay. And you can have a situation where two or three of the incidents are connected, but the other ones are not. And it's the same thing that happened back in 2015 when you had the church fires at African American churches after Dylan Roth killed the 9 African Americans at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in South Carolina. So there was a rash of church fires that took place right after that. And then people were saying it's connected and things like this, right? But I covered that those church fires on my show, and I was doing nationally syndicated radio right around that time. When you do research on this, and I did, I looked at and I forgot the name of the agency, but the I looked at the agency that tracks fires nationally, and there was something like 1,700 uh, fires at churches and places of worship uh, in a year. Okay. And only about something like about 16%, only about 16% of those fires were arson related. A lot of those fires, somewhere around 30%, dealt with cooking utensils, fires because of cooking utensils. 4% dealt with lightning strikes. Okay. It was only about, I think it's only about 16% that were arson related. Okay. And when the investigation came out about the different church fires, they found out, okay, so these are different denominations of churches, and they found out that those 7 church fires, it was not coordinated, but African American churches across the country, you know, will catch fire throughout the year. Doesn't mean the Klan did it. And there are approximately 1,700 fires at churches, mosques, synagogues, religious uh, places of worship, and funeral homes in a year. Okay, so before people just start jumping to conclusion, you have to do the research. And I was looking at research from things from the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, looking at the church fires. And I remember it was one investigator who said that when he goes in and investigates fires, um, he doesn't go in with preconceived notions, because then you will miss clues. You want to go and just follow the evidence as opposed to going in thinking that you know what happened. Let me see here. Church fire atheists. So I want to pull this. I want to look at some of the articles that I have. So that was the NFPA. I think NFPA. That was the name of the That's the name of the organization, NFPA. Okay, and that is National Fire Protection Association. Okay, that's what it was, the NFPA. There was a article here from ABC News. I'm going back into my archives, so just bear with me because I didn't know I was going to talk about this. There was an article from ABC News from what's this, 2015? 2015, June 2015, June 29th, 2015. Let me just look at this quickly here. Because I talked about this on my show. I have a file folder in my file cabinet dealing with articles, dealing with church fires around this time, but I can't get over to the file cabinet. So I'm looking in my archived bookmarks. String of fires at 6 predominantly Black churches scrutinized. They come after a shooting at a Black church in Charleston left 9 dead. Now, this is June 29th, 2015. Okay. And let me close some of these tabs here. Still have tabs open for dealing with Junkanoo from a couple nights ago. A string of church fires with predominantly Black congregations from Florida to Tennessee has reported fires in the past week, officials said. The circumstances surrounding the 6 fires in 5 states differ in each case, but they're occurring in the past 8 days has prompted closer scrutiny. Okay, now what happened was when you would look at that, so it started drawing attention because it happened after the killing at the Dylan Roth killed 9 African Americans at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. But you got to go back. So that was in June of 2015, right? But you got to go back and look at church fires starting in January in 2015, not when the killing happened. You got to go back to January 2015 to see that, you had something like 30 or so church fires every month. All right. So far, only 2 of the 6 cases are being investigated as arson, and federal authorities have not launched any official hate crime investigations. Read the rest of this article. They talk about the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I have a file folder on this, and it gets deeper into this also. We'll continue this on the other side of the break, and we'll talk about the bomb threats at 8 HBCUs that took place on Tuesday. We'll talk about Plessy versus Ferguson and the press conference that AG Merrick Garland did today as well, dealing with the investigation into the domestic terrorist attack, January 6, 2021. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by. How's everybody doing? Stand by. Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Stand by. All right, stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Hold on. God damn it. Stand by. All right, stand by. Back from break in 3 minutes. All right, who still needs to register for online classes? I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968 on Saturdays. And then on Sundays, it's Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Teach that on Sundays, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stand by. We'll post a link here. We have a bundle pack. You can register for both classes for only $70 for a very limited time only. Regularly $130 each. All right, hold on. We lost our connection to the radio station. Stand by, everybody. Back from break in 2 minutes. Oh, man, what the hell is this doing? Yeah, man. Skype went out on me again. I'm back. All right. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. All right. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 if you have a question or comment. So right before the break, I was talking about the bomb threats that at least eight HBCUs received on Tuesday, January 4th. Washington Post has a big article about this, as well as thegrio.com this is from Wednesday, January 5th. Howard University and at least 7 other HBCUs received bomb threats triggering evacuations and lockdowns. So we were talking about this before the break, and I was comparing this to the rash of church bombings or church fires that took place at African American churches right after Dylan Roth shot and killed 9 African Americans at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church back in June of 2015. Now, in many cases, the threats arrived in the midst of winter break or to campuses much emptier than usual as school officials sought to keep people safe amid the pandemic. Now, a statement from the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff said, although the threat was unfounded, we ask that everyone remains vigilant. They added that the full student body had not yet returned from the holiday break, but those who were there were relocated off campus. Now, at Howard University, the start of the semester was delayed due to a surge of coronavirus cases in the DC area in December 2021. So students were not on campus. They can begin moving in on January 14th for classes expected to begin on January 18th. Now, administrative operations had resumed on Monday, but most staff members are working remotely at the moment, according to a Howard University spokeswoman, Kimberly Holmes Iverson. Now, the Howard University said DC police contacted Howard's Department of Public Safety on Tuesday afternoon to alert them that their dispatch center had received an anonymous call saying that 2 bombs had been placed in Howard's administration building. in Howard's administration building. The two departments secured the perimeter. According to a statement from the university, they evacuated the building and searched the area. No active devices were found, and the area was cleared. No active devices were found, and the area was cleared. Now, at Spelman College officials announced on Wednesday, January 5th, that its Department of Public Safety and the Atlanta Police Department responded to a potential bomb threat in the Manley College Center on campus on Tuesday, January 4th. The building was secured after a search. No device was found, and Atlanta police continued to investigate. At Norfolk State University, a bomb threat on Tuesday was called into Norfolk State University. Okay. And the university's police chief, Brian Covington, said police relocated all students, faculty, and staff to a safe location until the campus was cleared. The FBI and Norfolk Police Department are helping the university's police department in the investigation. Now, a spokeswoman for the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Whitney Cruz, of the Washington field office of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, said they are collaborating with other law enforcement agencies in areas where the threats occurred. Quote, "We have current evidence that HBCUs are specifically targeted," Whitney Cruz said in a statement. "We are monitoring the events closely." Now, the threatening messages arrived during the afternoon or evening, the school said. Pine Bluff officials said their school received a threat about 5:15 p.m. Now, shortly after that, at about 5:30 p.m., North Carolina Central University police received a call regarding a bomb threat on campus. The campus was immediately locked down, according to school officials, with an alert to students and employees. Now, multiple agencies, including the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, law and fire departments, worked with university police to ensure all buildings were cleared, according to a university statement from North Carolina Central University. And all clear was issued at 9:15 p.m. The threats come after 3 Ivy League schools received similar bomb threats in November 2021, and TikTok posts on the social media platform TikTok posts hinting at potential school shootings prompted a dozen school districts across the country, including some here in Michigan, to tighten security last month in December 2021. Law enforcement officials later determined those threats were not credible. Now, those threats largely came after the Oxford, Michigan high school shooting took place in late November. I think that was November 30th, 2021. Those threats online to schools largely came after that took place, which caused a number of school districts to shut down temporarily. Now, nationally, the frequency of bomb threats has declined in the past 2 years, according to the latest tallies disclosed by a federal government data center. But the number of actual bombings has risen. A trend that forces schools to take threats more seriously. In 2020, the most recent year for which the data center has published tallies of 818 bomb threats have been documented. That figure was about a 20% drop from the previous year, and about half of the 1,627 threats received in 2018. But officials reported 428 bombing incidents in 2020, which was a 71% increase from the previous year and the highest number of bombing incidents in the US since 2016, when 439 bombings were documented by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Check out the rest of this piece here from the Washington Post. Howard University and at least 7 other HBCUs received bomb threats triggering evacuations and lockdowns. And thegrio.com has an article on this as well, and they cite the piece from the Washington Post in their article. All right, I want to go to this other story here, and we're coming up here on the break. So we talked about Plessy versus Ferguson U.S. Supreme Court case, and we talked about back in November 2021 that a Louisiana state board recommended the posthumous pardoning of Homer Plessy, who was the plaintiff in Plessy versus Ferguson. Well, that pardon came today. Associated Press is reporting man whose arrest led to separate but equal is pardoned. And this is Governor John Bel Edwards issuing the pardon. So Louisiana's governor on Wednesday, January 5th, posthumously pardoned Homer Plessy, the black man whose arrest for refusing to leave a whites-only railroad car in 1892 in Louisiana led to the Supreme Court ruling in 1896 that cemented separate but equal into U.S. law for half a century. That was Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case. And it's also important to note that Homer Plessy could pass for white. He said himself he was 7/8 white, 1/8 African. Okay, so we'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by. Stand by. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Stand by. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Stand by. Okay, who still needs to register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? We had a great class this past Sunday, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Our current promotion is buy 1 month, get 2 months free. We have 3 new advertising packages that are just released today. And they're different tiers, different price ranges. Email us at AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with us. I'm about back from break in 3 minutes. So we have a platinum, gold, and silver advertising package. Okay, Financial Matters LLC, that's John Ray. We sharpen our B2B pack. Okay, Ronnie, you got to email me. Okay, people, I don't have like unlimited space to advertise. So y'all need to email me. You want you need to email me now. All right. Email me AHNShow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Buy 1 month, get 2 months free. That's not going to last forever. That's very limited. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, January 5th. It's hump day, okay? January 5th, 2022, and we are live. Those who haven't heard me in the new year, Happy New Year to everybody. Happy Kwanzaa as well. We know Kwanzaa ended January 1st, but those 7 principles of the Nguzo Saba, we are supposed to practice those all year long. We're not, Kwanzaa is not designed to be super black for 7 days and be a Negro the rest of the year. Okay, we're supposed to practice those principles throughout the year. All right, so 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Now, be sure to register for the online classes I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968 on Saturdays. It's a 10-week online course, and we go through and look at what leads to the Civil War taking place, and we deal with that period of history, 1865 to 1968, Civil War, Reconstruction, World War I, World War II, Jim Crow era, Black migration, the Great Migration, all that, okay? And then on Sundays, I teach in this class here on Sundays. I've been teaching this since 2017. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 10-week online course. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Next class is Sunday, January 9th of Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We do the sessions live. All the classes are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime, even a year from now. If you want to go back and watch the entire class, you still have full access. For a very limited time only, we have a course bundle pack where you can register for both classes for only $70. Classes are regularly $130 each. So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and you can register for those classes. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. Okay, we're going to post the information here on the thread here of the broadcast, and as soon as you register, you can start watching the classes. Okay, so right before the break, we were talking about this update in Plessy versus Ferguson, and Homer Plessy, who described himself as 7/8 white. We know he was arrested and he's prosecuted. This took place in 1892 in Louisiana, and it leads to the 1896 U.S. Supreme Court case. We'll go on to clip 1 from the Black News Channel in just a second here, Jalen, and I think that's clip 1 on Plessy versus Ferguson. Okay, so the State Board of Pardons in Louisiana in November 2021 recommended the pardon for Homer Plessy, who boarded the railroad car as a member of a small civil rights group hoping to overturn a state law segregating trains. And we see that those state laws, that segregation on public transportation and on trains, that goes back to 1881 in Tennessee. The state legislatures, after Reconstruction ends, and we deal with this in my class from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power. After Reconstruction ends, these state legislatures start reversing these rights of African Americans and start imposing segregation on various levels. So we see Tennessee do this, and we're going to see this throughout the South and Louisiana. That law comes to Louisiana in 1892. All right. Now, so instead, the protest led to the 1896 ruling known as Plessy versus Ferguson, which solidified whites-only spaces in public accommodations such as transportation, hotels, and schools for decades. Now, at a ceremony held near the spot where Homer Plessy was arrested, Governor John Bel Edwards, governor of Louisiana, said he was beyond grateful to help restore Homer Plessy's legacy of the rightness of his cause, legacy of the rightness of his cause, undefiled by the wrongness of his conviction, undefiled by the wrongness of his conviction. Now, Keith Plessy, whose great 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 grandfather was Homer Plessy's cousin, called the event a truly blessed day of our ancestors and for children not yet born. I want to go to this clip from the Black News Channel. They talked about this today. Here's Tashani Whitlow. Let's go to this clip, Jalen.
A devastating wrong was righted in Louisiana today. Governor John Bel Edwards posthumously pardoned Homer Plessy. Now, in 1892, Plessy was arrested for refusing to leave a whites-only railroad car in protest of racial segregation. His case inspired the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that cemented separate but equal into law for half a century. BNC's Janice Price, she's live in New Orleans where the ceremony just wrapped up. Janice?
So, Shani, it was in this very spot where Mr. Homer Plessy was arrested for refusing to leave that white-only train car. Today, just a block from this marker, Louisiana addressed the wrongs of this country. Homer Plessy was posthumously pardoned, his record wiped clean. It was a moment shared by Plessy's descendants and the descendants of Louisiana Judge John H. Ferguson, who convicted Plessy for violating the state's Separate Car Act of 1890.
Yeah, just let it play. It's gonna clear up.
The ancestors are carrying it, and you know that's why I feel the way I do about this. I'm so happy today. You know, I could have cried several times, but I'm too happy to cry.
It is our union, Plessy and Ferguson, that makes the statement that we can come together to change the unjust laws that have caused so much harm in this country. And we want to be a symbol and inspire folks to come together and work through their differences.
All right, and as you heard earlier, Janice was having some audio issues, so I'll pick up where she left off. Mr. Homer Plessy died with a criminal record. Today it was wiped clean, and his legacy was made whole.
Okay, that's from the Black News Channel. Some good reporting also by Tashani Whitlow, who was in the studio. Now, here's a picture of Homer Plessy as well. Now, he described himself as 7/8 white. And in Louisiana, you had a whole lot of intermixing in Louisiana. He could pass for white. Tennessee, the state legislature in Tennessee in 1881 voted to segregate railroad passenger cars. They were followed by Florida in 1887, Mississippi 1888, Texas 1889, Louisiana 1890 in Louisiana. The incident happened in 1892 in Louisiana. Louisiana state legislature passed the law in 1890. Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Georgia in 1891. South Carolina is going to do the same thing as well. Then we know Louisiana, when they rewrote their state constitution in 1898, they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests, but they're also going to impose the grandfather clause. Louisiana was the first state to have the grandfather clause. Some other states are going to adopt that as well. Okay, so check out the article here from the Associated Press. And some other outlets picked up this story as well. This is a breaking news story earlier today because I got a couple of news alerts about this. Man whose arrest led to separate but equal is pardoned. All right. Okay, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We're going to keep going for a few more minutes, and then we'll also talk briefly about the press conference that Attorney General Merrick Garland had today, dealing with the January 6th investigation to the domestic terrorists that tried to overturn election results. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. Also, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, Dr. King Day is coming up. African American History Month is coming up. Email me at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Email me now. Don't wait till like the day before the event. to contact me. Email me, AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want me to do a presentation for a group or organization. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. All right, stand by. How's everybody doing? Okay, we're going to keep going here. Share this broadcasting and social media platforms. We're on 910 Superstation WFDF in Detroit for the first hour. Okay, African American business owners, post and name your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. I'll send you information about our 3 new ad packages. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this before on this level. So this is going to blow you away. Okay. We have 3 different price ranges also that you can advertise with the African History Network. We have 1 million followers on our Facebook page. And one of the packages includes us posting to our stories on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Okay. Current promotion for a very limited time only. Buy 1 month, get 2 months free. All right. I want to go to this. Let's go back to this piece here from the Associated Press. And on tomorrow's show, we're going to go back to the story dealing with Nicole Hannah-Jones. We're going to finish up that clip, the interview that Chuck Todd, mediocre Chuck Todd on Meet the Press did with Nicole Hannah-Jones. We'll pick that back up on tomorrow's show. There's a lot. I'm looking at a number of different stories that I want to cover here. Okay, so Keith Plessy, whose great-great-grandfather was Plessy's cousin, called the event truly a blessed day for our ancestors and for children not yet born. Since the pardon board vote in November, quote, I've had the feeling that my feet are not touching the ground because my ancestors are carrying me, he said. Now, Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote the 7-1 decision in 1896, quote, legislation is powerless to eradicate racial instincts or to abolish distinctions based upon physical differences. Now, Justice John Marshall Harlan was the only dissenting voice, writing he believed the ruling in 1896, quote, will in time prove to be quite as pernicious as the decision made by this tribunal, the Supreme Court, in the Dred Scott case in 1857 decision that said no Black person who had been enslaved or was descended from a slave could ever be a citizen in the U.S. Okay, U.S. citizen. Well, 14th Amendment struck to overturn that. 1. But 2, the main crux of the ruling of the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision, March 6, 1857, is nullifying the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Because by nullifying the Missouri Compromise of 1820, it then invalidated Dred Scott's argument, because one of the territories that Dred Scott was taken into was wasn't just Missouri. Well, Missouri was a slaveholder state, but he was taken into Wisconsin. Okay. And when they nullified the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which abolished slavery in Wisconsin, made slavery in Wisconsin illegal, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional, it then invalidated Dred Scott's argument, or Sam Blow. Sam Blow was his real name. This was the case of Dred Scott versus Sanford that was decided March 6, 1857 by the U.S. Supreme Court. If you read this piece here from history.com, Dred Scott case, they go through and break this down. We talk about this in my class. They go through and break this down. Dred Scott, okay, in 1818, he moved with his owner, Peterborough to Alabama. Then in 1830, he moved to St. Louis, Missouri, both slave states where Peterborough ran a boarding house. Okay, after Peterborough died in 1832, Army Surgeon Dr. John Emerson purchased Sam Blow, who we call Dred Scott, and eventually took him to Illinois, a free state. Illinois abolished slavery in 1818, and then to Fort Snelling in Wisconsin Territory, where the Missouri Compromise had outlawed slavery. There, Dred Scott married Harriet Robinson, also enslaved. In a rare civil ceremony, her owner transferred ownership of Harriet to Dr. John Emerson. In late 1837, Dr. John Emerson returned to St. Louis, but left Dred Scott and Harriet Scott behind and hired them out. Dr. Emerson then moved to Louisiana, a slave state, and we know Louisiana, that territory becomes part of the U.S. because of the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. This is why in my class dealing with from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, we deal with events leading up to the Civil War taking place, and one of them is the Louisiana Purchase and the organizing of that territory, 828,000 square miles of land that the U.S. gets from France, that France stole from Native Americans and African people who are already here. And this organization of the land, like the Missouri Compromise, that these are things that are going to lead to the Civil War taking place. And in 1820, you had a balance between slaveholding states and free states. You had 11 slaveholding states and 11 free states. So Emerson then moved to Louisiana, a slave state, where he met and married Eliza Irene Sandford in February 1838. Dred Scott soon joined them. Okay, make a long story short, if you skip down here. Okay, Dred Scott versus Sanford, blah, blah, blah. Read all that. Since Dred and Harriet Scott lived in Illinois and the Wisconsin Territory, both free domains, they hoped they had a persuasive case. When they went to trial on June 30th, 1847, because this was tied up in courts for 10 years. However, the court ruled against them on a technicality, and the judge granted a retrial. The Scotts went to trial again in January 1850 and won their freedom. Irene appealed the case to the Missouri Supreme Court, which combined Dred and Harriet Scott's cases and reversed the lower court's decision in 1852, making Dred Scott and his family enslaved again. In November 1853, Dred Scott filed a federal lawsuit with the United States Circuit Court for the District of Missouri. By this time, Irene had transferred Dred Scott and his family to her brother, John Sandford, although it was determined later that she retained ownership. On May 15th, 1854, the federal court heard Dred Scott versus Sandford and ruled against Dred Scott holding him and his family in slavery. In December 1854, Dred Scott appealed his case to the United States Supreme Court. The trial began on February 11th, 1856. By this time, the case had gained notoriety, and Dred Scott received support from many abolitionists, including powerful politicians and high-profile attorneys. But on March 6, 1857, the infamous Dred Scott Decision, Dred Scott lost his fight for freedom again. So Chief Justice Robert Taney, talk about him in his writing. Taney became best known for writing the final majority opinion in Dred Scott versus Sandford, which said that all people of African descent, free or enslaved, were not United States citizens and therefore had no right to sue the federal court. But the Supreme Court interprets law, they don't make law. Supreme Court interprets law, they don't make law. In addition, he wrote that the Fifth Amendment protected slave owner rights because enslaved workers were their legal property. The decision also argued that the Missouri Compromise of 1820, that legislation that passed Congress, passed to balance the power between slave and non-slave states. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional. So here you have the judicial branch of government interpreting law from the legislative branch of government. In effect, this meant that Congress had no power to prevent the spread of slavery because the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government had no authority to dictate to the states whether or not they could have slavery. Because what the Missouri Compromise of 1820 did was it allowed Missouri to come into the Union as a slaveholding state. It allowed Maine to come into the Union as a free state to keep the balance between slaveholding states and free states, but it prohibited people in the remaining territories that the U.S. got because of the Louisiana Purchase. It prohibited slavery in those remaining territories. The U.S. Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision ruled that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional. One of the territories that Dred Scott was taken into was the Wisconsin Territory. Slavery was prohibited in Wisconsin because of the Missouri Compromise. The Supreme Court ruling then nullifies Dred Scott's argument. Because they ruled that the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. All right, read the rest of this piece here. Dred Scott case, history.com, history.com's official website of the History Channel. All right, now back to this piece from the AP. Justice John Marshall Harlan was the only dissenting voice, writing that he believed the ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson, quote, will in time prove to be quite as pernicious as the decision made by this tribunal in the Dred Scott case of 1857. The ceremony began with cellist Kate Dillingham, a descendant of the dissenting justice, playing Lift Every Voice and Sing, written by James Weldon Johnson in 1899, while the audience sang along. The Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, allowing racial segregation across American life, stood as the law of the land until the Supreme Court unanimously overruled it in 1954 in Brown versus Board of Education, U.S. Supreme Court case. Both cases argued that segregation laws violated the 14th Amendment's right to equal protection. The Brown decision led to widespread public school desegregation and the eventual stripping away of Jim Crow laws that discriminated against African Americans. Homer Plessy was a member of the Citizens Committee, a New Orleans group trying to overcome laws that rolled back post-Civil War advances in equality. Because after Reconstruction ends, and we go through and look at these laws put in place in the class I teach on Saturdays. After Reconstruction ends, you have all these southern states, they're stripping away the voting rights of African Americans, changing the state constitutions, starting with we see it in Mississippi, 1890. But even we can go back to 1876 with Texas. They're changing the state constitutions to impose poll taxes and literacy tests, and in some cases, property ownership requirements to suppress African American voters. And in Mississippi, in 1890, African Americans were the majority of the voters in Mississippi. So then we're going to see South Carolina, 1895, Alabama. We see Alabama in 1901, Louisiana, 1898. We're going to see these southern states rewrite their state constitutions deliberately to suppress the African American vote. And during Reconstruction, you have about, which is 1865 to 1877, you have about 2,000 African Americans who get elected to public office. We're in the state legislatures in South Carolina. The majority of the majority of the members of the state legislature in South Carolina were African American men. You read this article here from the Washington Post that we talked about a number of times here on the show. The Mississippi plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. This is what they said. This was the purpose of it. And Judge Solomon Saladin Calhoun was the convention's president. He was a white county judge. And he put the voting issue bluntly. He said, let's tell the truth. If it bursts the bottom of the universe, he said, we came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer. Because they want to change the laws in these southern states to suppress the African American vote and get these African American men out of elected office. Delegates eventually adopted a literacy test and poll tax geared to suppress the black vote in a state with a black majority, Mississippi. The Mississippi plan became the model throughout the South, part of a raft of racially oppressive Jim Crow laws that ended Reconstruction. The reason why you needed a Voting Rights Act of 1865 was to eradicate what the Mississippi plan did in 1890. It struck down the poll taxes and literacy tests and property ownership requirements, all those things, grandfather clause, all it struck down all that. That's why you needed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. All of this is connected to history. Okay, so read the rest of the article from the Associated Press. And there was a piece that we talked about. There was an interview that Charles Blow did with historian Yahuwah Williams back in November, dealing with Plessy versus Ferguson. And I want to, this right here, I want to squeeze this interview. I want to go to this quickly here because this ties everything together and ties us all to history. And back in November, we reported that the Louisiana State Board of Pardons recommended a pardon for Homer Plessy, and it actually became actually it was Mark Lamont Hill that did the interview with Yahuwah Williams. So since this actually took place today, I want to go back to this interview here, and this deals with the recommendation for the pardon 130 years after the conviction. But then historian Yahuwah Williams also deals with this history of separate but equal in the segregation laws and how Plessy versus Ferguson set the tone for white privilege, how it set the tone for white privilege.
Back to Black News Tonight. Louisiana State Board of Pardons earlier today unanimously decided to clear Homer Plessy's record of a 130-year-old conviction. His name might not immediately ring a bell until, of course, one mentions the Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. 6 decades before Rosa Parks was arrested in Alabama, Homer Plessy had already violated the Separate Car Act by taking a seat on a white-only train car in New Orleans. He was later found guilty and fined $25. That's a lot for back then. He took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, which then upheld the infamous separate but equal ruling. This decision solidified the Jim Crow era segregationist policies in the South until they were struck down by the 1954 decision of Brown versus the Board of Education. Joining me now to discuss is Uhuru Williams. He's a professor of history and the founding director of Racial Justice Initiative at the University of St. Thomas. Dr. Williams, welcome to the show. Help us understand what the Plessy versus Ferguson decision is. Lots of people have heard that phrase, Plessy versus Ferguson. People know the year 1896, but they don't necessarily fully understand what it means.
It was the decision really that established the doctrine of separate but equal. And this was the idea that in the United States, you could have facilities that were separated by race as long as supposedly there were equal accommodations. And that's why that decision is so important. Louisiana had passed the Separate Car Act in 1890, which required separation of the races on public carriers. Homer Plessy and a committee of mixed race and African-American citizens tried to test the constitutionality of that act, and that's what led to Plessy versus Ferguson. The reason that's so important is that before that, there was a lot of fluidity in race relations. You had some communities where African Americans could use the same facilities. Post Plessy, you see every state, essentially in the South, in the former cradle of the Confederacy, and even outside the Confederacy, begin to adopt laws that prohibited integration or mixing of the races. Baltimore, Maryland applies that to cities in 1910. I mean, you see it in all aspects of American society and culture, and that's why that decision is so important. It really establishes the legal precedent for segregation in America.
Talk to us about who Homer Plessy was. You know, for a lot of people, Plessy versus Ferguson, it's like Brown versus the Board of Education. We know the name. We know the name of the court case, but we don't necessarily understand who the person was. Who was Homer Plessy? Most people don't know about pre-civil rights era activists who paved the way for many of the decisions that we would see with Rosa Parks, that we would see with Martin King, et cetera.
It's a great story in that regard because it exposes people to these ordinary individuals who otherwise have ambiguous lives but wind up in these court cases, and we're exposed to them in that way. I was very excited today when I heard people talking about Claudette Colvin, people talking about Mary Miles, who sued the Philadelphia and Westchester Railroad in 1867, Homer Plessy from 1896, of course, Rosa Parks, whom everyone knows. But these were ordinary, average African Americans. Homer Plessy was a shoemaker, was involved in civil rights, had been someone who was upset by the Separate Car Act, wanted to do something to challenge that inequality in his community. And when the opportunity presented itself, because he, for all intents and purposes, presented as white, he agreed to be the test case for that particular challenge. And so we celebrate him today, too. This is a victory for acknowledging that history and acknowledging the role. I think this is an important lesson for young people that ordinary activists, ordinary people play in helping to make history. People don't wake up and say, I'm going to make history today. They just put themselves in positions where they can challenge inequality, and sometimes history catches up.
So that context of this ordinary person who engages in a battle, an act of resistance, both in the moment and also through the courts long term, he's doing this in the middle of New Orleans. New Orleans was a multiracial city. The Separate Car Act had an extraordinary impact on the culture. It had an extraordinary impact on daily life in an urban city like New Orleans. What did it mean for him to do what he did?
It was a huge act of defiance, Mark. And in fact, this is what's so interesting about New Orleans is the site of this case, because it is a city where there is so much intermixture of the races, where you had that French influence, Creole influence, and no prohibition, at least early on, in terms of what they called miscegenation and the mixing of the races. The idea was that if you were going to challenge something like the Separate Car Act, that was the state to do it in, because it was very difficult to tell where the color line actually began and ended. The argument was that for all intents and purposes, if Homer Plessy had not told the conductor on the train that day that, in fact, he was African-American, there's no way that the conductor would have known. And that in and of itself was their attempt, this Committee of Concerned Citizens' attempt to illustrate the inanity of having a law based on the color of one's skin that would determine where they sat in a public area or what their citizenship rights would be in relation to their color. So, in that sense, this was a huge case in New Orleans, huge case because it really was going to define the color line as we know it. Today, we think about, and we talk about, particularly in the African-American community, a host of products that people use to straighten their hair, to lighten their skin. That's also a legacy of Plessy versus Ferguson. When the color line is determined by color, features, and hair, there's property in whiteness and being able to present white. And so you see in the aftermath of Plessy versus Ferguson, people trying to achieve that look so they could have access to literally first-class citizenship. That's also kind of the hidden legacy of Plessy as well.
So there are two major 14th Amendment decisions that we can think about. The first one is Plessy versus Ferguson. The second one is Brown versus the Board of Education. One is saying that separate is equal. The other is saying that separate is inherently unequal, right? So we've seen the kind of progression and shift based on these court cases. Are there other rulings that we should be thinking about historically? Are there other things that we might not be thinking about are as big a deal as they are? Because my audience right now is like, oh, okay, Plessy, now I get it. Now I get how this affects us sitting at a lunch counter. Now I get what our ancestors were fighting against. What else are rulings that are in a similar vein?
Such a great question, Mark. I think a half a dozen that immediately present themselves or come to mind for me. The Scottsboro cases, which dealt with African-American representation on jury trials. So criminal justice cases that in our history are very important. Neal versus Delaware, another case very similar to the Scottsboro cases. When we think about the Smith versus Allwhite, the all-white primary in the South, very important cases.
1944.
So I would say, for people who are interested in this topic, a book like Richard Kluger's Simple Justice, which documents the Plessy case, but looks at these other precedents in other areas, what I like to call the 6 degrees of segregation. Wherever you saw barriers to absolute equality before the law for African Americans in housing and education and access to places of public accommodation, in voting rights, in Jim Crow justice, you're going to have parallel cases that map to those denials. In housing, for example, we think about cases like Heard versus Hodge and Shelley versus Kramer, which dealt with restrictive covenants, which barred African Americans from owning homes in neighborhoods which were occupied by whites. And these were private agreements, which until the 1940s were judicially enforceable. It's not until Heard versus Hodge and Shelley versus Kramer that they become judicially unenforceable. But the reality is that segregationists, white supremacists found a way around that. And we still are dealing with the legacy of redlining and restrictive covenants even today. But this is an important aspect of our history. I always say to young people, we should memorize the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Really, that is for African Americans, our Declaration of Independence. And then secondly, we should understand the nuance and context of these cases because they matter tremendously in our contemporary moment.
I like that. The 14th Amendment is our Declaration of Independence. That's profound and very, very true. Yoru, as always, you are brilliant. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for joining me on Black News Tonight.
All right. So that was from Black News Tonight with Dr. Mark Lamont Hill interviewing historian Yoru Williams. And that was from November 12th, 2021. November 12th, 2021, when the news came out that the Louisiana State Board of Pardons unanimously decided to clear Homer Plessy's record, his record of a 130-year-old conviction. And we know that Governor John Bel Edwards signed that into law today, and Homer Plessy has been exonerated posthumously, but he's been exonerated. Now, this article here, we talked about this back in November, right around November 12th, when we dealt with this story in November 2021. Homer Plessy's arrest in 1892 led to a landmark ruling. Now he may get justice. This is from the New York Times, November 12th, 2021, and it talks about Homer Plessy violating the Louisiana Separate Car Act, which was signed into law by the Louisiana State Legislature in 1890. Okay. And, Homer Plessy was, he pleaded guilty. He was fined $25. And there was a charge. Let's see, there was another charge he was hit with. History as okay, so Plessy died in 1925, and much of that. Okay, let's see here. There was traveling, looks forward to receiving. Time member, which calls for pardoning individuals who've been convicted. Okay, in the 1890 Louisiana Separate Car Act was precisely that kind of law, part of a flurry of segregationist legislation pursued across the South in an effort to construct a new racist order after Reconstruction. Let's see, he was an activist. Okay, so a conductor asked Homer Plessy if he was colored, and he said that he was 7/8 white, 1/8 African, as he described himself. When the conductor instructed him to move to a different car, Homer Plessy resisted. After his arrest, the activist group, the Citizens Committee to Test the Constitutionality of the Separate Car Act, posted his $500 bond. Let's see here. The notion separate. Okay, so read the rest of this also. Now, this picture here, this is Keith Plessy and Phoebe Ferguson, descendants of the principals in the Plessy versus Ferguson court case. This is a picture from 2011. There's a historical marker behind them, Plessy versus Ferguson. So read this article also for the New York Times from November 12, 2021. Homer Plessy's arrest in 1892 led to a landmark ruling. Now he may get justice. And that happened today, even though it's 131 years late, but it happened. We're going to continue here just a second. African-American business owners, email us at AHNShow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com and post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at AHNShow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. We have 3 new advertising packages. We have a special promotion right now for a very, very limited time only. Buy 1 month, get 2 months free. We have advertising packages starting at under $100. And we can take a 30-second and 60-second commercial. We can create one for you if you don't have one. We put into the rebroadcast of these shows. We put into our audio podcast. We're on 10 different audio podcast platforms also. iHeartRadio, iTunes, FM Player, Facebook Podcasts, a number of different places as well. So we have low-cost ways to help you market your African-American owned business. Okay, so email us ahnshow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, I want to go to this last story here. And this is dealing with Attorney General Eric Garland. And then also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. African American History Month is coming up, and we have a 15 DVD bundle pack of 15 of my lectures. The Michael Imhotep 15 DVD Black History bundle pack. Okay, it's right on the homepage of our website. These are 15 of my lectures, all dealing with our history, and one deals with the origins of African American History Month as well. So that bundle pack is on sale $100 right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, so Attorney General Merrick Garland held a press conference today, and I shared the press conference live on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. I want to go to this clip here from MSNBC, go to an excerpt of the press conference, and we'll probably talk some more about it on tomorrow's show. We'll probably talk about it some on tomorrow's show. And I'm going to pull up this article here from the Washington Post. Just a second. Let me go to this here. Okay, Garland DOJ will hold those responsible for January 6th riot accountable. Let's go to this clip here. Here's an excerpt of the press conference from today. And more than 725 defendants have already been arrested and charged who were there January 6th.
Months of the investigation, approximately 145 defendants pled guilty to misdemeanors, mostly defendants who did not cause injury or damage. Such pleas reflect the facts of those cases and the defendant's acceptance of responsibility, and they help conserve both judicial and prosecutorial resources so that attention can properly focus on the more serious perpetrators. In complex cases, initial charges are often less severe than later charged offenses. This is purposeful, as investigators methodically collect and sift through more evidence. By now, though, we have charged over 325 defendants with felonies, many for assaulting officers and many for corruptly obstructing or attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. 20 defendants charged with felonies have already pled guilty. Approximately 40 defendants have been charged with conspiracy to obstruct a congressional proceeding and or to obstruct law enforcement. In the months ahead, 17 defendants are already scheduled to go to trial for their role in felony conspiracies. A necessary consequence to the prosecutorial approach of charging less serious offenses first is that courts impose shorter sentences before they impose longer ones. In recent weeks, however, as judges have sentenced the first defendants convicted of assaults and related violent conduct against officers, we have seen significant sentences that reflect the seriousness of those offenses, both in terms of the injuries they caused and the serious risk they posed to our democratic institutions. The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead. Because January 6 was an unprecedented attack on the seat of our democracy, we understand that there is broad public interest in our investigation. We understand that there are questions about how long the investigation will take and about what exactly we are doing. Our answer is, and will continue to be, the same answer we would give with respect to any ongoing investigation. As long as it takes, and whatever it takes, for justice to be done consistent with the facts and the law. I understand that this may not be the answer some are looking for, but we will and we must speak through our work. Anything else jeopardizes the viability of our investigations and the civil liberties of our citizens.
Okay, so that was just an excerpt of the press conference from today. And let me close this out here. Stand by. Okay, so that's just an excerpt of the press conference from today. Check out the article from NBC News. Garland vows to hold January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable. That is one article. That's from NBC News. Also, there's a good one as well from the Washington Post. Now, I posted the press conference live when it was taking place. We shared that video on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and my personal Facebook page also. All right, now, very quickly here, if we look at this. So if we look at the piece from the Washington Post, Garland DOJ will hold those responsible for January 6th riot accountable, whether they were present or committed other crimes, Attorney General Merrick Garland vowed to hold all those responsible for the January 6th riot accountable, whether they were at the Capitol or committed other crimes surrounding the day's events, saying investigators are methodically building more complicated and serious cases and would prosecute people at any level. Let's see here. Yeah, there's something part I want to go to here. So hold on, I want to go to so we know there have been over 700, there's been 725 people who've been arrested and charged. There have been about 70 people so far who've been convicted. And let's see. Let me go to okay. So federal prosecutors in DC announced last week that they have charged more than 725 people with assault. There's still about 250 people that they're looking for who were there January 6th. Federal prosecutors in DC announced last week that they have charged more than 725 people with assault, resisting arrest, and other crimes in connection with the events of January 6th. About 165 people have pleaded guilty, the U.S. Attorney's Office said. About 165 people have pleaded guilty. Now, and then there have been about 70 or so who've been convicted. Now, the FBI is still seeking to identify and arrest more than 200 additional suspects from that day, including an individual who placed pipe bombs outside the Democratic and Republican National Committee headquarters. Now, in his speech, Attorney General Merrick Garland ticked through the damage the rioters inflicted, attacking police officers with pipes, poles, and chemical agents, and destroying journalists' equipment. He read the names of 5 police officers who responded that day and have since died, and called for a moment of silence in their memories. Now, Stanley Brand, a former House counsel, House of Representatives counsel, who represents some January 6 defendants and witnesses, called the speech, quote, vintage Merrick Garland, a classic discussion of criminal justice 101 and due process, which is what I would hope and expect, even though I'm representing some of these people, end quote. The speech was a textbook explanation of the prosecutorial system, Stanley Brand said. This is the largest criminal investigation in the history of the United States, and a lot of it happens like an iceberg under the surface. That's necessary. That's our system, end quote. Now, Attorney General Merrick Garland's speech also ventured beyond the events of January 6th, also ventured beyond the events of January 6th. January 6th, he spent significant time addressing threats against election workers and others, saying the Justice Department would prosecute those who make illegal threats, but also would work within the bounds of the First Amendment. The department has been clear that expressing a political belief or ideology, no matter how vociferously, is not a crime, AG Merrick Garland said. He said the department had charged more people in criminal threats cases in 2021 than in at least any of the previous 5 years. The Department of Justice has charged more people in criminal threats cases in 2021 than in at least any of the previous 5 years. But officials have also struggled to make cases. For example, a task force formed last summer 2021, to investigate threats against election workers has yet to make an arrest. AG Garland went on to say, but as with violence and threats of violence, the Justice Department, even the Congress, cannot alone defend the right to vote. The responsibility to preserve democracy and to maintain faith in the legitimacy of its essential processes lies within every elected official and every American, including the 147 traitors Republicans that voted not to certify the 2020 presidential election. There's 147 traitors who voted not to certify the election results. Okay, so read the rest of this from the Washington Post. Garland, DOJ will hold those responsible for January 6th riot accountable, whether they were present or committed other crimes. All right, look, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We have 6 days a week. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc. Stay on the air. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it shows my picture and it says Michael. These other ones here are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. And then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. African American business owners, email us at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. We have 3 brand new advertising packages just released today. And we have them in different price ranges. So you can start 2022 off right and advertise your African American owned business with the African History Network. Email us at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. So you may have a brick and mortar store. You may have a e-commerce store. You may sell books. You may be a book author. You may have sell African garb. You may sell traditional clothing. You want to advertise with the African History Network. And also post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast as well. Let me pull this up here. All right. Let me flip over to this slide just a second here. All right, so you may have an e-commerce and or brick and mortar store. You may sell African cultural products. It could be skincare products. It can be hair products. It can be books, whatever it is, African garb, African clothing, health and beauty products, clothing, shoes, books, African history books, African American books, fiction, self-help. You may be in education. You may have homeschooling networks. You may have educational curriculums. You may teach financial literacy. You may have an event coming up. Dr. King Day is coming up, African American History Month, Women's History Month, Juneteenth. You may have a conference or seminar that you want to market, that you want to advertise. You may sell African jewelry. You may have a fitness website. Okay. You may sell fitness products or clothing. You may be a fitness trainer, what have you. Okay. Email us at TheAHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. All right. Be sure to register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. On Saturdays, it's From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. It's a 10-week online course I teach. And we do all the classes live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Then Sundays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we have classes this weekend. We have a special bundle pack for a very limited time only. Normally courses are $130 each. We have a special bundle pack for a very limited time only. You can register for both classes for only $70. Now, also for people, they may say, well, look, I'm almost finished building my website right now for my business. I'm going to advertise once it's built. You can secure your ads today. Contact us now. You can pay for the ads. You can run them in February, March, what have you, when you get ready, because I don't always have advertising space. Space is limited. So you can secure your ads now. You could, if you want to run the ads in February, March, what have you, that's fine. It's not a problem. People do that all the time. Okay. Don't wait till you actually need to run the ads to do it if you know that you want to do this now, because I don't always have the advertising space. I only have a certain number of ad spots. Okay, so we're going to post the information here for the online class also. All right, here's the information for the course bundle pack. And it's also at our website as well. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Health and well-being have long been a taboo subject in the so-called African American community. So I enlisted the help of mental health experts, thought leaders, and activists to help kill the ghost of Willie Lynch and heal from post-traumatic slave syndrome.
We experience trauma a lot of times on a subconscious level. So sometimes something happens to us and we know that it's traumatizing, but we don't really recognize the extent of the trauma.
Soul in Motion, celebrating 38 years in the arts. This energetic ensemble of dancers and drummers was started by percussionist Michael Friend and is led by choreographer Associate Director Pam Lassiter. Based in the Washington, D.C. area, Soul in Motion is now accepting bookings for Black History Month, Juneteenth, and summer festivals in 2022. Soul in Motion is also available for more intimate events like naming ceremonies and weddings. To find out more or to book your date, call 240-452-1349 or send an email to info@soulinmotion.org. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Soul in Motion, celebrating our history, our culture, our future. Soul in Motion, theater, African dance, and drumming since 1984.
African Spirit Cards specialize in the design and printing of high-quality African-centered note cards and stationery. African Spirit Cards breeds and rejoices in the African and African American experiences. They honor our African heritage in all that they do for you by proudly displaying the great motifs and ornamentations of the African world diaspora. They use African images, African proverbs, and many African languages to fully immerse their clients in the wisdom and history of and the connection to Africa. They understand the importance of having images around us that reflect who we are. These images also illustrate where we came from and what we desire to be. They are here to serve you. Follow them on Instagram at African Spirit Cards, that's African with a K. They have a wide selection. Check out their holiday selection at etsy.com/shop/African Spirit Cards. That's Etsy, ETSY. You can give them a call at 313-995-3579, 313-995-3579. You can email them at janeldesigns@africanspiritcards.com. That's JANAL designs@africanspiritcards.com, and place